Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be reviewing popular diet trends and the evidence behind them. So we'll be examining 8 diet trends. They include Paleo, Low-Carb, Keto, Mediterranean, DASH diet, Weight Watchers, intermittent fasting, and a whole food plant-based diet. So for each trend, we're going to be covering what it is, what it entails, the rationale behind it, and finally the evidence behind it. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So for our first diet, we're going to be talking about the Paleo diet. So the Paleo diet, also called the Caveman diet, focuses on eating meat, fish, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, while also avoiding dairy, grains, legumes, and processed foods. It's high in protein, moderate in fat, and low in carbs, emphasizing whole, unprocessed foods. So the theory behind this diet is that our genetics have not evolved fast enough to adapt modern food systems. So the idea is we can achieve optimal health by mimicking what our ancestors ate during the Stone Age. So the evidence behind this diet is very interesting. So modern paleo eating isn't actually truly reflective of what our ancestors ate. Recent evidence is showing that our ancestors actually ate a predominantly plant-based diet and had a much higher fiber intake, about 100 grams, compared to today's daily recommended amount to be 50 grams of fiber.
Whoops, I actually meant to say 25 to 38 grams per day.
Furthermore, studies of the Hazda hunter-gatherer society actually show that their diet is predominantly plant-based with a very diverse gut microbiome. And fun fact, this was done by analyzing their fossilized stool samples. So the key takeaway here is that the paleo diet does encourage whole foods, which is fantastic, but the historical basis is questionable because, as we said, sounds like our ancestors actually were more plant-based rather than predominantly animal-based eaters. And therefore, the exclusion of certain food groups may not actually be necessary to promote health. Okay, now let's move on to the ketogenic diet. So keto is a high-fat, moderate protein, and very low carbohydrate diet. And when I say low, I mean less than 50 grams of carbs a day. It limits grains, fruit, starchy vegetables, while focusing on fats and meat. So the rationale behind this is very interesting physiologically. So this diet aims to induce ketosis, and this is where the body will burn fat instead of carbs for fuel. This idea is built on the carbohydrate insulin hypothesis, which suggests that by reducing your carbohydrate intake level, then you will then reduce your insulin levels in your body. And this will in turn promote fat burning and weight loss. So studies actually show the ketogenic diet is very effective in short-term weight loss. However, this is in large part due to the loss of water and muscle mass in the initial stages. In some studies, it actually suggests that the fat loss is lower, which actually contradicts the carbohydrate insulin hypothesis. Furthermore, the keto diet has been shown to promote short-term benefits to cardiovascular markers. So these are things like blood pressure, HDL, and triglyceride levels. However, these benefits are only seen within the first year and actually diminish beyond the first year mark. In fact, we actually see rises in LDL and VLDL beyond the first year mark. LDL, for those of you who don't know, is the bad type of cholesterol that we want to minimize at all costs. So in addition, there are several health concerns seen in various studies done on the keto diet. First is in regards to bone health. So long-term adherence to the keto diet can negatively impact your bone health. A study of children who were on a ketogenic diet for 6 months actually showed reduced lumbar spine bone density. Furthermore, this can negatively impact your gut health because people tend to adopt a lower fiber intake when on this diet because the emphasis is only placed on the protein and the fat. This therefore reduces your short-chain fatty acids in your gut, which is very key in promoting that healthy gut bacteria. And then this induces all sorts of inflammation throughout your body. Furthermore, this diet encourages a predominantly animal-based eating pattern that is deficient in vegetables and fruit, and this can increase your chronic disease risk and overall mortality in the long run, despite these short-term benefits seen with the weight loss. So the key takeaways here is that the keto diet may appeal to those who are seeking more rapid results. However, the water and muscle loss it triggers is not a sustainable weight loss strategy. Furthermore, it also comes with long-term health risks, including reduced bone health, worsening cardiovascular markers, and impaired gut health. Okay, so side note on this 50-gram carb a day restriction. So this is actually a really insane restriction. The National Academy of Medicine actually emphasizes that a carbohydrate intake of at least 130 grams a day is crucial for providing the brain and nervous system with adequate glucose for normal function. So yeah, I think that's insane, but people survive on it. But anyway, back to the video. Okay, moving on to the DASH diet. So the DASH diet emphasizes fruits, vegetables, whole grains, low-fat dairy, fish, poultry, beans, and nuts, while also reducing sodium, sugary drinks, and red meat. So this was designed as part of the DASH trial to lower blood pressure by incorporating foods that are proven to reduce hypertension or high blood pressure. So the DASH trial showed that the DASH diet significantly lowers blood pressure, especially when combined with low sodium. Participants in the DASH trial actually saw reductions in their blood pressure up to 21 milligrams of mercury. And this was effective in those with and without hypertension. So the key takeaway here is that the DASH diet is backed by strong evidence for heart health and blood pressure management. All right, hey guys, I'm back here. I got my matcha and I'm sitting out here at the Island Brew Coffee House coffee shop. Anyway, back to the video. Okay, so the next diet we're going to talk about is the Mediterranean diet. So this was inspired by diets from Crete, Greece, and southern Italy. These diets are rich in whole grains, fruits, vegetables, legumes, healthy fats like olive oil especially, and moderate levels of fish and wine consumption. So the rationale behind this was due to population studies done in the mid-20th century showing that Mediterranean populations actually had lower rates of chronic disease and longer lifespans. And this is all despite a limited access to healthcare at the time. And the evidence behind it is pretty impressive. So here I'm going to talk about the major cardiovascular benefits of the Mediterranean diet, and I want to shed a spotlight on two major trials. First one being the Lionheart study. So this pivotal trial showed that adopting a Mediterranean diet could reduce cardiovascular events by 50 to 70% in people who were recovering from myocardial infarction, or MI, in other words, a heart attack. The second study is the PREDIMED trial. So this was a large multi-center Spanish trial involving over 7,000 participants, and this evaluated the impact of two types of Mediterranean diets, mainly differing in the use of nuts and extra virgin olive oil. And they compared these groups against the control low-fat diet group. So the outcomes here show that both Mediterranean diet groups showed about a 30% reduction in the risk of cardiovascular death, stroke, and myocardial infarction when compared to the control group. Furthermore, long-term adherence to the Mediterranean diet shows a significant reduction in mortality, especially with individuals who already have a history of cardiovascular disease. So the key takeaway here is that the Mediterranean diet is one of the most evidence-based eating patterns, promotes heart health and longevity. Whether you're looking to improve your cardiovascular disease risk or just adopt a flavorful, sustainable diet, the Mediterranean diet offers a scientifically proven path to better health. Okay. So moving on to intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting, or IF, alternates between eating and fasting periods. So there are three popular methods of doing this. The first is the 16-8 method, which involves 16 hours of fasting and then 8 hours of eating. A second popular version is the 5-2 method, which includes 5 days of eating ad libitum and then 2 days of low-carb days. So while this dietary pattern is very effective for weight loss, other health benefits are actually not well studied. Evidence for other health benefits is pretty mixed. There are some studies that do suggest that there is some degree of reduction in risk for chronic disease. However, there needs to be more larger randomized controlled trials done to better examine that. Another thing to note though is that intermittent fasting may not be for everyone, particularly those with certain medical conditions like anorexia, bulimia, pregnancy, and sometimes even diabetes, especially those who are insulin dependent. So definitely talk to your doctor before considering transitioning into an intermittent fasting diet. So the key takeaway here is that intermittent fasting can aid in weight loss, but it does require more research on the long-term benefits and examine whether this actually can reduce the risk of chronic disease. Okay, so home stretch here. We got 3 more diet trends to talk about. So now moving on to the low carb diet is a high protein, moderate fat, and low carb diet. And when I say low carb, I mean less than 130 grams of carbohydrates a day. And this is a key difference to the ketogenic diet, which limits your carbohydrates to less than 50, which is crazy. Anyway, they limit grains, starchy vegetables, and fruit. So the rationale here is very similar to the keto diet. So this involves the carbohydrate insulin hypothesis, that if you reduce your carbohydrate intake, that's going to in turn reduce your insulin levels in your body and therefore improve your glycemic control. And fun fact, the low carb diet currently is still one of the recommendations under the dietary guidelines according to the American Diabetes Association. Of course, now they also include a whole food plant-based diet and Mediterranean diet as well. So let's get into the evidence behind it. So let's talk weight loss. So a low carb diet pattern can induce rapid weight loss within the first 6 to 12 months of the diet. However, after 1 year, the weight loss is pretty comparable to other dietary patterns. In terms of management of diabetes, there are short-term benefits in regards to biomarkers indicating your glycemic control. In particular, the A1C levels. Now, one meta-analysis found a significant reduction in A1C levels with a low-carb diet pattern at 3 months and 6 months. However, it's important to note that there does appear to be long-term consequences of this dietary pattern. So, beyond the 12-month period, the A1C levels, although initially declining, will start to plateau. Insulin resistance has been shown to actually worsen over time, which of course raises doubts about its sustainability in managing diabetes. Furthermore, studies also show that there are mortality risks with this diet. One study showed that diets with less than 40% of calories from carbohydrates actually show an increase in overall mortality and also cardiovascular mortality. However, there was an interesting finding in mortality in these low-carb diets where the predominant source of calories are coming from plant-based sources. So when the diet focuses on plant-based sources of fat and protein, the all-cause mortality and cardiovascular mortality risks are actually reversed. And finally, it is again important to note that carbohydrates are very important to your brain and nerve function. So the National Academy of Medicine actually emphasizes that we need at least 130 grams of calories from carbohydrates daily to support our brain function. So the key takeaway from the evidence here is that a low-carb diet will provide short-term benefits, particularly with weight loss and A1C control. However, it does face long-term challenges, especially with insulin resistance and increased mortality risks, especially if the low-carb diet primarily focuses on animal-based products for their fat and protein intake instead of plant-based products. Okay, so moving on to Weight Watchers. So I'm sure you guys have all heard about this app. Honestly, I think this thing has been around for over more than 20 years at this point. So those of you who don't know, Weight Watchers is a commercial program focusing on health foods and portion control. No foods here are actually off limits, but portion sizes and calories are tracked. So the rationale behind this is that Weight Watchers, their purpose is to create a calorie deficit in a more manageable way. And they do this through accountability, through tracking points, and providing a supportive community, behavior changes, and flexibility by allowing individuals to make their own dietary choices. So for the evidence behind it, it's pretty impressive. So Weight Watchers is one of the few commercial programs with consistent success in weight loss when sustained long-term. However, weight maintenance can be a bit challenging, and I'll get into that a little bit. So in terms of the efficacy of weight loss, systemic reviews and randomized controlled trials show that Weight Watchers has consistently shown a moderate level of weight loss when the program is sustained beyond 12 months. Another study showed that individuals who maintain at least a 5% weight loss after completing the program were 80% successful at 1 year, 71% successful at 2 years, and 50% successful at 5 years. So as you can see here, while the initial success is promising, there is a slight decline in the sustainability of the weight loss over time. So Weight Watchers actually stands out in comparison to other commercial weight loss programs. We think this is due to its evidence-based approach and success in fostering moderate, sustainable weight loss compared to many other diets. So in conclusion, Weight Watchers is one of the few commercial programs with strong evidence supporting its long-term efficacy in achieving moderate weight loss. While maintenance remains a challenge for some, its combination of flexibility, accountability, and behavioral support makes it a leading option for those seeking a structured yet adaptable weight management strategy. Okay, last but not least, a whole food plant-based diet. Plant-based. I'll get something plant-based later. Okay, so a whole food plant-based diet, or WFPBD, for those of you who don't know, is a diet which emphasizes consuming whole foods, grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, fruits, vegetables, and seeds while avoiding animal products, oils, and processed foods. So the primary rationale behind a whole food plant-based diet lies in its health promoting abilities. By avoiding processed foods and animal products, this diet focuses on nutrient-dense, low-calorie options that provide satiety. The high fiber and carbohydrates support glycemic control, while the avoidance of oils and processed foods minimizes calorie density. Additionally, this dietary approach aligns with the GLP-1 incretin effect, which enhances feelings of fullness and reducing caloric intake without the need for deliberate calorie restriction. So the evidence behind it is wonderful, and if you want to go way more in depth in it, I will link a video right here for you guys to watch. But in terms of population studies, a 2019 study published in JAMA Internal Medicine tracked over 300,000 individuals for 28 years and found a reduction in incidence of type 2 diabetes among those individuals who were consuming the most plant-based unprocessed foods. In terms of clinical trials, so in the 1970s, Anderson and Ward conducted a study on 20 men with insulin-dependent diabetes. After adopting a plant-predominant, low-fat, high-carb, fiber-rich diet for 16 days, 9 patients eliminated insulin use, while the rest reduced insulin requirements by about 50%. Furthermore, Dr. Neil Barnard's randomized controlled trial with 99 participants compared a high-carb, low-fat vegan diet to the conventional American Diabetes Association diet. After just 22 weeks, the vegan group actually had double the amount of weight loss when compared to the control, and greater improvements in the A1C levels. These benefits persisted at 74 weeks, however, not statistically significant. In terms of weight loss studies, the BROAD study showed participants randomized to a whole food plant-based diet education program achieved an average weight loss of 12.5 kilograms at 6 months and 11.5 kilograms at 12 months. And this level of weight loss is unmatched by any non-calorie restrictive diet to date. A meta-analysis of 15 trials, which included 10 randomized controlled trials, found that non-calorie restricting vegan and vegetarian diets led to an average weight loss of about 3.4 kilograms in individuals with obesity and type 2 diabetes. In terms of lifestyle programs, the Complete Health Improvement Program, or CHIP, or also known as PVO, incorporates whole food plant-based diet principles in addition to the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, which include restorative sleep, exercise, and emotional health strategies. Participants experienced a significant reduction in fasting blood glucose levels, blood pressure, cholesterol, and BMI just within 4 weeks. So key takeaway points with this diet are that a whole food plant-based diet emphasizes unprocessed, nutrient-dense foods and offers flexibility when compared to other vegan diets. The diet's rationale focuses on satiety, glycemic control, and reducing calorie density without deliberate restriction. Furthermore, substantial evidence supports its efficacy for weight loss, glycemic control, and reducing chronic disease risk, which makes this a sustainable and health-promoting option for many individuals. All right, so what's the verdict? Each diet has its own strengths and weaknesses, but here are the key takeaway points. So the paleo diet encourages whole foods, which is amazing, but it may lack historical accuracy. The keto diet is effective short-term in weight loss, but may have some long-term health concerns. The DASH diet is clinically proven to improve blood pressure and heart health. The Mediterranean diet is one of the top choices for overall health and longevity. Intermittent fasting appears promising with its ability to promote weight loss, however requires further research to examine its role in chronic conditions. The low-carb diet promotes weight loss short-term, however we don't see these same effects in the long term. Furthermore, the results depend on the type of food choices, specifically plant-based foods versus animal-based foods. The Weight Watchers program is a sustainable weight loss strategy for moderate weight loss. And finally, the whole food plant-based diet has efficacy in chronic disease risk reduction and glycemic control. And this diet is unique in its ability to promote weight loss without requiring calorie restriction. Okay, that's all that I have for you guys today. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more health tips and reviews. Let me know in the comments which diet you guys are interested about. And until next time, stay happy and healthy. Bye, guys.